What is loneliness? A question that echoes in the hollow spaces of our lives, often answered with the fear of emptiness, of being left behind. We see it as a void, a silent room after the guests have gone, a chilling wind in a city of millions. Society teaches us that connection is currency, that belonging is the ultimate prize. But is this the entire truth? What if, for some, loneliness is not an absence, but a presence so vast, so demanding, that it eclipses everything else? We look at the solitary lighthouse, a lone sentinel against an indifferent ocean, or the silent observatory gazing into the sprawling, silent cosmos, and we see abandonment. But perhaps what we are truly witnessing is not a state of lack, but a profound and overwhelming dialogue. The exceptional spirit, the mind that operates on a different frequency, often finds itself on this precipice. It's the curse of seeing the blueprint beneath the building, of hearing the symphony beneath the noise. To perceive the world with such clarity is to be fundamentally estranged from those who see only the surface. It is to speak a language for which there are no fluent listeners, to feel a pain or a joy so acute it becomes untranslatable. This is not the loneliness of a failed social life. It is the inevitable solitude that comes from standing at a higher altitude, where the air is thin, but the view is infinite. It is a shadow cast not by darkness, but by an overabundance of light, a light that illuminates truths others are not yet ready or willing to see, and so they are set apart, not by choice initially, but by the very nature of their soul's gravity. The philosopher, the artist, the inventor, they are pushed to the margins by a world that craves simplicity and fears complexity. Society has no room for the labyrinthine mind, and so it builds its comfortable, straight roads around it. This journey then is not about finding a way back to the crowd. It is about understanding that this imposed isolation, this fated solitude, is not a punishment. It is an invitation. It is the beginning of a pilgrimage into the self, a descent into the quiet crucible where the raw material of genius is separated from the dross of convention, and where the true work of a lifetime is finally allowed to begin. This is the strange fate of the pioneer. To stand at the edge of the known world is to be, by definition, alone. The mapmakers of the mind, the cartographers of the soul, they cannot work in a crowd. The very act of drawing a new boundary places them outside of the old one. For them, reality is not a fixed, solid object, but a pliable substance, a code that can be rewritten. But to reveal this truth to a world comfortable with its illusions is a dangerous act. The collective instinct is to neutralize the anomaly, to ignore it, to mock it, or to simplify it into a caricature that can be safely filed away. This is the first wall the exceptional mind encounters, the soft, suffocating barrier of collective incomprehension, a world that demands conformity as the price of admission. Consider Friedrich Nietzsche, a man whose thoughts were as colossal and jagged as the alpine peaks he chose for his sanctuary. In the bustling academic salons of Germany, his ideas were a discordant noise. They were too sharp, too unsettling. He spoke of gods dying and supermen being born, while his contemporaries debated footnotes. So he fled. He fled to the high solitude of Sils Maria, not merely to heal his ailing body, but to save his mind from the suffocating mediocrity of the marketplace, as he called it. There, in the crushing silence of the mountains, his philosophy found its true voice. His loneliness was not an escape from humanity, but an escape from the noise that prevents one from truly hearing humanity's deepest, most terrifying truths. Or consider the quiet rebellion of Emily Dickinson. From the confines of her room in Amherst, Massachusetts, she constructed entire universes. The world saw a recluse, a spinster, who withdrew from society for reasons unknown. But was it a withdrawal or a strategic fortification? Her room was not a prison, it was an observatory of the soul. From that single window, she witnessed the eternal dramas of life, death, love, and eternity, with a clarity no traveler could achieve. Her solitude was a fiercely guarded space, a necessary vacuum that protected her delicate, explosive insights from the clumsy intrusions of the outside world. Each poem she wrote was a universe in a bottle, a message sent out into a future she knew would be more capable of understanding her than her own time ever was. And then there was Nikola Tesla, a man who seemed to be in conversation with electricity itself. He walked the streets of New York, a city teeming with millions, yet he was profoundly, cosmically alone. His mind operated in a future that had not yet been built. While others saw a wire, he saw a conduit for global communication. While others saw a spark, he envisioned limitless free energy for all. This vision isolated him more than any ocean. He was surrounded by investors who saw only profit, by rivals like Edison who saw only competition, and by a public who saw only a strange magician. His laboratory became his only true homeland, a cathedral of his own design where the only hymns were the hum of alternating current and the crackle of manufactured lightning. Nietzsche, Dickinson, Tesla, the philosopher, the poet, the inventor, each one pushed to the edge, inhabiting a self-imposed or socially dictated exile. Their stories force us to confront a disquieting question that lies at the heart of all originality. Does the singular mind actively seek out the desert, or is it cast out into it? Is this profound isolation a self-inflicted wound, or is it the scar left behind when a mind of immense gravity breaks free from the orbit of the ordinary? This initial exclusion, this painful awareness of being different, is not the end of their story. In truth, it is the necessary precondition. It is the clearing of the stage before the true drama can begin, the turning of the key in a lock that opens not to a void, but to a forge. There comes a moment in the life of the exiled mind when the walls of the prison begin to feel like the walls of a sanctuary. The initial pain of exclusion, the sting of being misunderstood, slowly subsides. It is replaced by a startling revelation. The silence they once feared is not empty. It is a resonant space, a chamber of echoes where the faintest of signals can be amplified. What happens when the spirit stops fighting the current and learns to navigate it? It discovers that the solitude it was cast into is not a barren wasteland, but a forge, a place of immense pressure and heat, where the self can be stripped of its impurities and hammered into an instrument of purpose, an object of terrifying and beautiful strength. The first thing to burn away in this forge is the noise, not the sounds of the city or the chatter of a crowd, but a more insidious clamor, the relentless tyranny of opinion. Society is a constant negotiation of approval, a marketplace of borrowed ideas, where originality is often punished and conformity is rewarded. To be truly creative is to risk ridicule, to be wrong, to be grotesque in the eyes of the majority. Solitude, then, becomes a deliberate act of rebellion. It is the conscious unplugging from the hive mind, the creation of a sacred space where an idea can be born without being immediately judged, where a thought can be followed to its most radical, illogical, and brilliant conclusions, far from the jeering chorus of common sense. In this self-imposed silence, Friedrich Nietzsche was not simply hiding, he was warring. He was conducting an autopsy on 2,000 years of Western morality, and such a bloody, delicate operation could not be performed in public. Each day, he would walk for hours, letting the vast, amoral silence of the mountains strip away the layers of inherited belief. His solitude was his laboratory and his battlefield. It gave him the intellectual ruthlessness to declare a God dead, to dismantle virtue, and to erect in their place a philosophy that would terrify and inspire the next century. He was not talking to his contemporaries. He was forging a language for the supermen of the future, a task that required the absolute absence of his present. The artist knows this forge intimately. Virginia Woolf called it a room of one's own, but it is more than a physical space. It is a psychic territory. It is the freedom to exist without an audience, for the self is always performing when it is being watched. In solitude, this performance ceases. The mask drops. What is left is the raw, chaotic, often contradictory essence of the creator. This is the only state in which true art can be born, because it requires an honesty that is impossible under the gaze of others. The first draft of a masterpiece is almost always a mess, a vulnerable and unformed thing. The silence of the studio is the incubator that protects this fragile life until it is strong enough to survive the light. Nikola Tesla's laboratory was his kingdom, a sovereign nation with a population of one. Within its walls, he was not a madman or a failure. He was a pure explorer. The relentless pressure from investors, the scorn from his scientific rivals, the demands of a world wanting immediate results, all of it dissolved at the door. This isolation gave him the most crucial of all scientific gifts, the freedom to fail. He could build monumental towers that didn't work. He could chase theories that led nowhere. He could spend years on experiments that yielded nothing but knowledge. This sacred space for trial and error, free from the shame of public failure, is where his most revolutionary successes were born. He understood that every dead end is a map, but you can only read it in silence. This is the critical turning point in the journey. The great deception of a social world is that we come to know ourselves through our interactions with others, but what we truly come to know is our reflection, our persona, the carefully curated self we present. The forge of silence burns that reflection away. When all the voices vanish, you are finally forced to listen to the only one that remains, your own. And this encounter can be terrifying. It is a confrontation with your unfiltered ambitions, your deepest fears, your ugliest contradictions. To stand in that silence is to meet your naked self for the first time. Many flee from this encounter. The genius, however, stays. They listen. It is from this encounter that true courage is born. Not the bluster of public performance, but a quiet, unshakable conviction. The courage to trust an intuition that defies all logic, to pursue a vision no one else can see, to hold fast to a truth that the entire world denies. When you have wrestled with your ideas in the profound solitude of your own mind, when you have subjected them to your own harshest criticisms and they have survived, the skepticism of others becomes a harmless echo. You no longer seek validation from the outside world, because you have already forged it within. This internal certainty is the armor that allows the visionary to walk through the fire of public opinion unscathed. Think of the solitary mind as a deep-sea diver. The surface of the ocean is society, teeming with life, bright, loud, and chaotic. It is a place of constant motion and fleeting connections. But the greatest treasures, the strange, luminescent creatures of the abyss, the priceless pearls of insight, lie in the crushing, silent darkness below. To reach them requires a deliberate descent, a journey away from the light and warmth of the collective. It is a lonely, perilous journey into a realm of immense pressure, but it is the only way. The diver cannot bring the crowd with him. He must go alone, hold his breath, and venture into the depths where the universe whispers its most profound secrets. Ultimately, this process cultivates a sublime indifference, a freedom from the addiction to praise and the fear of condemnation. The work becomes its own reward. The scientist becomes obsessed not with the Nobel Prize, but with the elegance of the equation. The artist is driven not by the applause of the gallery, but by the desperate need to translate an internal vision into external form. In the forge of silence, the creator's allegiance shifts. It is no longer to the tribe, to the market, or to the critics. It is to the work itself, to the truth it is trying to reveal. This is the final liberation, to serve the idea, not the audience. The chains of loneliness have been reforged into a key. The curse has been alchemized into a tool. The silence, once a symbol of absence, has revealed its true nature. It is a canvas, the pristine, untouched space upon which a new world can be imagined. The solitary mind, having survived its exile and mastered the fire of its own forge, no longer looks back at the world it left behind. It begins to look beyond. Having learned to speak with itself, it is now prepared for a different kind of conversation, a dialogue not with the fleeting voices of the present, but with the silent, patient, and eternal voices of the infinite. Once the self has been forged, it becomes an instrument, and the purpose of an instrument is to perceive what is beyond the reach of the naked senses. The solitude that was once a shield now becomes a lens, a finely ground piece of glass capable of focusing the faint scattered light of a distant truth. The internal dialogue with the self, so crucial for survival, begins to quiet down, making way for a grander conversation. The mind, now a tuned receiver, stops broadcasting its own anxieties and starts listening to the subtle cosmic signals that hum just beneath the surface of reality. It is in this profound state of listening that the true purpose of the journey is finally revealed. Sir Isaac Newton, sheltering from the Great Plague at his family home, spent 2 years in near total isolation. The world outside was gripped by death and fear, a storm of chaos. But within the silent fortress of his mind, Newton was conversing with the universe in its native tongue, mathematics. He was not merely hiding from a pandemic. He was in a dialogue with the fundamental forces of existence. In that silence, the laws of motion and universal gravitation revealed themselves to him. They were not his inventions. They were secrets he overheard, whispered to him by the cosmos, because he was the only one in a quiet enough room to listen. His solitude was the fertile ground for modern science itself. For others, this dialogue takes place with the earth. For the poet, the painter, the mystic, to walk alone in nature is not to be without company. It is to be in the company of something more ancient and honest than humanity. It is to feel the slow, patient time of a mountain, to understand the ruthless, beautiful logic of a forest, to hear the wisdom of an ocean that has been breathing for millennia. In the presence of such immense non-human life, the ego dissolves. Personal sorrows and ambitions seem trivial. The solitary spirit in this communion finds it is not separate from the world, but is a temporary conscious expression of the world itself. And what is a great work of art, if not a conversation across centuries? When an author writes a book, they are not speaking to the void. They are in profound dialogue with every writer who came before and every reader who is yet to be born. In the quiet of her room, Emily Dickinson was not a recluse. She was hosting a salon for the future. Her poems are letters addressed to us. Her physical solitude becomes a minor footnote to the immense, timeless community she created through her work. She chose her audience, and her audience was not the Society of Amherst in the 1860s, but the immortal soul of humanity itself. This is the alchemy of creation, turning physical isolation into endless connection. Here, then, is the secret of the luck Schopenhauer spoke of. The exceptional spirit is offered a cosmic trade. They are asked to exchange the fleeting warmth of contemporary acceptance for a far more enduring communion. They trade the chatter of the salon for a dialogue with Plato. They trade the comfort of belonging to a tribe for the chance to belong to the cosmos. They forsake the company of those who share their time for the company of those who share their soul, regardless of the century in which they lived. It is a staggering bargain, and one that seems like a curse to the ordinary mind. But to the spirit who feels the pull of the eternal, it is the greatest stroke of luck imaginable. A person sitting alone reading a book is never truly alone. They are in a room filled with the most brilliant, passionate, and revolutionary minds in human history. They can argue with Machiavelli. They can weep with Dostoevsky. They can journey through Middle-earth with Tolkien. The library is the true crossroads of time, the place where the living and the dead meet on equal terms. This is the community of the exceptional mind, a fellowship bound not by geography or chronology, but by the shared pursuit of truth and beauty. The only price of admission to this eternal conversation is the willingness to forsake the noise of the world, to sit, to be silent, and to listen with the entirety of one's being. Perhaps the most profound dialogue is with the infinite itself. To gaze into the night sky is to look into a sea of deep time. The light from a single star may have traveled for millennia to reach your eye, a message from a world long dead. In the face of this cosmic scale, the concept of personal loneliness becomes a mathematical absurdity. The ego, with its small anxieties and desperate need for recognition, is annihilated. There in the silent star-dusted abyss, the solitary observer feels a connection that transcends all human bonds, a sense of being a tiny, fleeting part of a magnificent and incomprehensible whole. It is the ultimate paradox. In confronting the universe's infinite solitude, one finds the deepest sense of belonging. The dialogue with nature, with history, with the cosmos, it all converges into a single transcendent state. The self, so carefully constructed and defended, begins to dissolve. The creator no longer feels like they are inventing but discovering. The philosopher does not feel like they are creating truth, but receiving it. The artist's hand moves, but it feels guided by a force older and wiser than itself. The individual becomes a channel, a conduit through which a larger truth can enter the world. The intense, often painful sense of separation that defined their life is replaced by a feeling of profound, blissful union with the fabric of existence itself. This is the moment, the culmination of the entire journey. It is the instant the creator realizes that their loneliness was the price of clarity. Their isolation was the vow of silence required to hear a sacred whisper. They see that the masterpiece, the discovery, the idea that has consumed their life was never truly theirs. It was a message that chose them as its vessel. They were the lonely shore upon which a cosmic wave was destined to break. This is the profound, earth-shattering beauty of their fate, to be so utterly alone that you finally become a bridge for everyone, to be so empty that you can finally hold the infinite. This is the blessing disguised as a curse. This is their luck. This single, luminous moment of pure connection is the secret jewel hidden inside the cold stone of solitude. It is the reward that makes all the years of misunderstanding, of exile, of silent, lonely work, not only bearable, but necessary. They did not do it for fame, which is merely the echo of the noise they sought to escape. They did not do it for fortune, which cannot buy what they truly craved. They did it for this, the brief, breathtaking instant of cosmic belonging, the feeling of a key turning in a universal lock, the chance to stand alone and for one perfect moment touch the face of eternity. But there is a terrible and immutable law of the universe. For every ascent, there is the risk of a fall. The same abyss that holds the secrets of creation also holds the specter of madness. To stare into the infinite is a perilous act, for as Nietzsche himself warned, when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. The path to transcendence is a razor's edge, with the sublime on one side and utter desolation on the other. The silence that nurtures genius can, with the slightest shift in psychic pressure, become the echo chamber of insanity. The luck of the exceptional spirit is to be invited to this dangerous precipice. Their tragedy is that not all of them find their way back. What is the nature of this danger? It is the loss of the mirror. For all its flaws, society provides a constant, grounding reflection. It is a feedback loop, a system of checks and balances that anchors us to a shared reality. When the solitary mind severs this connection, it risks becoming a closed system. Inside this echo chamber, without the friction of external dissent, the mind's own logic can become absolute. A brilliant insight can inflate into a grandiose delusion. A minor suspicion can fester and mutate into a consuming paranoia. The internal world, once a source of infinite creativity, becomes an inescapable prison whose walls are built from the creator's own thoughts, a labyrinth with no exit. The same silence of the Alps that gave Nietzsche the clarity to write "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" was perhaps the same silence that allowed his mind to unravel without a witness. His journey is the ultimate cautionary tale. He ventured further into the wilderness of the human psyche than perhaps any philosopher before him, but the journey took its toll. In his final lucid letters, one can feel the fraying of the threads, the growing terror of an intellect aware of its own impending dissolution. Did his immense solitude create the conditions for his genius and, in the end, for his madness? They may not be two separate stories, but one single, terrifying trajectory, two sides of the same fateful coin. Or we see it in the incandescent tragedy of Vincent van Gogh. In his isolation in the south of France, his art exploded with an almost unbearable intensity. He painted the sun not as a gentle star, but as a raging divine furnace. But this creative fire was also a consuming fever. The same solitude that allowed him to see the world with such vibrant, hallucinatory clarity also amplified his inner demons to a deafening roar. His little yellow house in Arles was both a studio of genius and a cell of torment. He is the perfect, tragic embodiment of the flame that both illuminates and consumes. A man who burned himself down to give the world a new kind of light, leaving behind masterpieces that feel both like a celebration of life and a cry of unbearable pain. This is the shadow that stalks the solitary traveler, a profound and lasting melancholy. After you have conversed with the stars, how can you return to the trivialities of earthly conversation? After you have wrestled with the fundamental questions of existence, how do you engage in the small talk that lubricates society? The return from the mountain is often more difficult than the ascent. The world seems loud, shallow, and impossibly foreign. This can lead to a crippling inability to reconnect, transforming a temporary strategic isolation into a permanent, painful alienation. The price for a glimpse of the infinite can be the loss of the simple, grounding comfort of the finite. We must then understand the truth. The luck of the exceptional spirit is a double-edged sword. It is a gift that can easily curdle into a curse. The capacity for profound solitude is a tool of immense power, but like any such tool, it is incredibly dangerous in untrained or unsteady hands. It can carve a path to immortality, or it can dig a grave. It grants the freedom to create new worlds, but it also grants the freedom to lose oneself in them completely. It is a blade that requires an almost superhuman balance to wield, a strength of character that must be as monumental as the intellect it accompanies. What provides this balance? What anchors these high-flying souls to the earth? Sometimes it is the simplest of things, a humble routine, a love for an animal, a dedicated correspondence with a single trusted friend who can act as a lifeline to the shared world. It is the discipline to not only enter the abyss but to know when and how to leave it. It is the wisdom to understand that the mind needs a tether, a small, simple truth to hold on to when the grand cosmic truths become overwhelming. The tightrope walker cannot look down into the void forever. They must also keep their eyes fixed on the solid platform at the other side. As we stand here, centuries later, we consume their genius as our inheritance. We read their books, marvel at their art, and build our world upon their discoveries. We celebrate the light they brought back from the darkness, but we rarely contemplate the true cost of the journey. We see the magnificent pearl, but we forget the immense crushing pressure that formed it, a pressure that often destroyed the fragile life at its center. There is a moral weight to this inheritance, a duty to remember the human sacrifice that is so often intertwined with the creation of the masterpieces we cherish. They paid a price, not just in lonely hours, but sometimes in sanity and in life itself. The forge of solitude, therefore, offers no guarantees. For every mind that it sharpens into a tool of genius, another is shattered into fragments. The journey into the silent self is the most dangerous expedition one can undertake. It is a gamble of the highest possible stakes, with the soul itself laid upon the table. And as we leave these figures to their fates, some immortalized, some broken, we are left with a sobering truth. The luck of the exceptional spirit is not a gentle blessing from a benevolent God. It is a dare, a challenge from the universe to walk the loneliest path, to face the deepest darkness, and to see if one can possibly emerge, not just with a masterpiece, but with oneself intact. So we are left standing at the crossroads of this profound paradox. We have seen that solitude is a forge, capable of creating works that can withstand eternity. We have seen that it is an abyss, capable of swallowing the very minds it empowers. It is both the most potent tool of creation and the sharpest instrument of self-destruction. What then is the lesson in these brilliant and broken lives? What do we take from their perilous journey as we navigate our own, much smaller silences? Perhaps the first step is to unlearn the fear that has been taught to us, to question the simple equation our society has made between being alone and being a failure. In our hyper-connected, relentlessly noisy world, we have become terrified of silence. We have filled every empty moment with distraction, mistaking constant communication for genuine connection. We present curated versions of ourselves to a digital crowd, seeking validation in the form of likes and shares. And in doing so, we drift further and further from our own core. We may never be physically alone, but perhaps we have never been more profoundly isolated from our own selves. We are surrounded by echoes, and we have forgotten the sound of our own voice. Maybe the path of the great spirits is not just a historical curiosity, but a vital, urgent lesson for us today. For this is the final, quiet truth that their lives suggest. The greatest, most painful loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of understanding. It is the ache of being in a crowded room, surrounded by friends and family, and feeling like you are speaking a language that no one else has learned. It is the burden of carrying a vision, a passion, or a pain inside you that feels utterly untranslatable, a universe within that no one else has the telescope to see. This is the solitude that truly breaks the heart, not to be alone in a room, but to be alone in a crowd, a ghost at the feast of life. When seen through this lens, the entire equation shifts. If the deepest loneliness is to be misunderstood, then the greatest act of courage is not to seek conformity, but to embrace the very thing that sets you apart. Everyone has a secret, internal music playing within them, a unique rhythm and a singular melody that is the signature of their soul. Society, with its powerful drums of expectation and conformity, does everything it can to drown it out, to force you to march to its beat. The most difficult and most important task in a lifetime is to learn to hear your own music through that deafening noise and to trust it. Perhaps then, the greatest loneliness is not being alone, but being surrounded by people who will never understand the music that plays inside of you. And perhaps the greatest luck, the true stroke of fortune, is to finally find the courage to dance to that music, even if nobody else can hear it.